Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. Well, the big news of this week, of course, is not economic, but the fact that the Modi government has decided to abrogate the provisions of Article 370 for Jammu and Kashmir and bifurcated the state into two union territories. With this has obviously led to a tremendous amount of chest thumping and congratulations all around. I'm sure most of the Indians, almost 95% of them, support this government for this move. It's a big news. It's probably the biggest news of the year that we would see. It has had a very unintended fallout. The fact is that this has completely pushed far more important news, unfortunately, which is negative, to the background, which is the economic news. Last week was particularly bad because we had headlines like Maruti, which produces India's more than 50% of domestic passenger cars, reported a 33.5% decline in sales. 33.5%, that's huge, with July 2019 over the same month last year. It has also cut its temporary workforce by as much as 6%. The people are actually losing jobs, far from in getting more. Air travel to and from India during January to March quarter of this year grew at 3.8% only, which is the slowest pace in the last 4 years. Across the board, across the sectors like commercial vehicles, banking, capital goods, more and more depressing data is coming out. Just virtually nothing is doing better than what it was maybe a few years ago, or maybe even last year. The slowdown is so severe that 90% of businessmen who have been very, very gung-ho about this government's policies and looking forward to a lot of investment and growth have started voicing their frustration for the first time since 2014, if I may add. A lot of examples. TV Mohandas Pai, whom I mentioned last time as well. Until recently, he's been a very aggressive champion of every move of this government. And he's come out literally with all guns blazing. Now, to quote him, tax terrorism has gone rampant, he said in a video. Compliance burden has gone up massively. There is a fear psychosis. There is a feeling among government officials that all businessmen are crooks and we must go after them. I have never seen such a bad mood and the morale being so down in Mumbai, the business capital. Businessmen have given up hope. And these are very strong words. Rahul Bajaj, chairman of Bajaj Auto, also very outspoken, who's been largely quiet for the last few years, says there is no demand and no private investment. So where will growth come from? It doesn't fall from the heavens. A.M. Naik, Larsen Toubro, another very large company and employing a lot of people, said we should feel lucky even if GDP growth comes at 6.5%. Now, after saying that, he added something which is very, very startling. And I'm not sure how he's going to get away with it because the government is obviously going to take it very seriously. He said he did not believe in government data in any case. His actual words were, situation is challenging on data credibility, which is a very polite way of saying that I don't believe what the government says. And so he said one has to use one's own judgment to get a sense of actual growth. Now, economic growth has slipped already to a 5-year low of 5.8% in March this year, and the Reserve Bank recently has cut next year's growth as well. Now, talking about data, amusingly, just a few months ago, that was in March, when 100 scholars had questions, they are economists and social scientists who work with a lot of data, when they had questioned India's economic data and had alleged political interference in the country's statistical organizations like CSO, Mr. Pai was one of the 131 chartered accountants who trashed them. And they said that they don't know what they're talking about and we should not question the government's data. And here is Mr. A.M. Naik saying, well, we don't believe what the government says and we have to figure out ourselves what the growth is. The chorus of disappointment has become very loud, so loud that the few English television channels were usually into the government's publicity in a rather sycophantic manner, have suddenly flipped. They are now running shows. They're giving airtime to people who are voicing criticism. Where are we headed in all of this? Growth is low and people are coming out, voicing their criticisms. Well, I would first start with the good aspects of this government, which is easy to forget. The Congress rule, especially of the last 10 years, was characterized by two memorable expressions we all know, which is policy paralysis and crony capitalism. Now, please look around. Nobody mentioned these words anymore. You can accuse this government of many, many things, but not these two things. That has hurt the Indian economy, not just for 10 years, a lot in the last 10 years, but also in the previous decades. Well, with this government, there is no policy paralysis. In fact, far from any paralysis, this is a hyperactive government. They are so quick to change the law that it's amazing. I haven't seen this kind of speed in the last 30, 35 years, and I'm sure in the last 70 years, not many people have seen. Insolvency and bankruptcy code, there's a problem with creditors. They just go back, change the clause, and it's all done in 7 days' time. That's super fast. Also, from what I can see, crony capitalism, which has resulted in lakhs of crores being looted from public sector banks, mainly by infrastructure companies, that is not there anymore. I cannot see virtually any reason to believe that anybody has taken advantage of being close to this government, except maybe in minor cases where probably we don't know the whole story. So these two things are hugely positive for India, especially the second one, because this is the real reason for poverty. By the insiders, people with power are able to get away by borrowing from the system and not paying back and not putting those assets to work effectively. Why then do we continue to have such a severe slowdown? Well, my view, and I think the reason is very simple. The reason is that the government policies and actions are not grounded in fundamental principles that can create economic growth, which is capital allocation. The government misallocates capital and continues to do that. There is no economic philosophy from which the policies are derived. In my view, the first principle of growth and justice is to reduce the intrusion and domination of the state, because the state is not a smart spender of resources. It wastes resources. The smarter spender of resources are people like you and me and business people who have to count every penny of the money that they spend. So the job of, if you want to create growth, the job of the government is to reduce itself, and that is not happening. Well, the better thing to do would be for the government to have empathy for citizens and businesses, people like you and me, businesses who employ people, create jobs, who deploy capital effectively. And the government should really go out of its way to show empathy for these people, because this is where the productivity of the nation, the growth of the nation resides. They are the ones who pay taxes. Well, that is maybe too much to expect, but that would be great. The least the government can do in the circumstances is not increase the despondency, friction, and anger by calling everybody a crook and unleashing mindly coercive actions. After all, we know who the real crooks are between Netas and Babus and Aam Aadmi. Without the first principles in place, which I just mentioned, which is a smaller government, less intrusive government, less wasteful government, and a government which is empathy for people who create jobs and pay taxes, we will have cyclical ups and downs, but we will not have any fundamental and rapid change which is defined by higher productivity of capital and labor. And everybody has been expecting from this government a very rapid change. I guess we will have to give up that idea. I see a lot of discussion on what the government should be doing. Now, like the story of 7 blind men, each expert sees just one aspect of the problem. So if somebody sees interest rates being very high, they say reduce rates and everything will be fine. On Friday, that's last Friday, Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, actually blamed economic reforms well, goods and services tax, the IBC, and so on, as the reason for the current slowdown. According to me, we've done a lot, too much, too soon. The problem is much, much, much deeper. Well, the Prime Minister called himself a Pradhan Sevak, and he said that in 2014, in his first probably Independence Day address. Almost all the leaders of the current government appear as adamant, as arrogant as those of the previous government. There's no empathy. A businessman described a minister whom he met recently as combative, unsympathetic to the slowdown, and not keen to listen. And that is not a very good recipe for creating economic growth, because, as I said, to repeat again and again and again, it is the citizens who spend, it is the citizens who pay taxes, it is the businessmen who create growth and employ people and create jobs. You have to show empathy for them. So if the government doesn't change its whole attitude, doesn't shrink, so I guess we will have to go through this process of a slowdown for a while. And then after a while, the demand is going to catch up with reduced supply, and suddenly you're going to have a cyclical upturn. And that's all that you should be expecting. Thanks for watching.